Welcome to the Education Innovators Podcast. I'm Eric Byron, and it is my privilege to host this show where I get to talk to folks from all over the world who are education thought leaders and innovators. We'll hear inspiring stories from educators, EdTech founders, AI experts, and others who are fearlessly innovating and delivering unique learning experiences. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started.
They don't know how to make decisions, so they need some framework. And that's where self-awareness comes in. Self-awareness allows you to think through what are your values and beliefs, what are your strengths and weaknesses. If they've done that inventory, because they don't have any yardsticks, they're just thrown into situations. They have to make decisions every day, 30, 50 decisions every day. And we expect them to make good decisions. They don't have any criteria. So it's at this point, we need to give them something.
That was Nitin Gour. He's the CEO and founder of Bloomster, a platform for children that helps them develop social and emotional skills. Now, Nitin brings an outsider perspective to childhood education, and he's not constrained by the limitations of traditional education and a focus on academics. So he's applying years of business and technical experience to solving a problem that many of us have been talking about, SEL, social and emotional learning. Keep listening. Well, I'm Eric Byron. Welcome to the Education Innovators Podcast. I have with me today Nitin Gour, and Nitin is the founder and CEO of Bloomster. So he's passionate about transforming education to focus on holistic student development. So Bloomster is a dynamic platform that empowers students by teaching over 25 essential skills, helping them thrive in 5 key areas critical to navigating today's ever-changing world. So with nearly 2 decades of experience in the corporate world, spanning technology and finance, Nitin came to recognize that academic success alone isn't enough to prepare young children or young individuals for real-life challenges. So welcome, Nitin.
Oh, thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here.
Great. This is going to be fun, I promise.
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely.
So to get us kind of started here, you spent like 17 years, if I added it up right, at Citibank.
Yeah. Yes.
That's a long time at one company. I know. I was 11 years at Disney, and my wife was 20 years at Disney. So it's a long time to be in one organization. But before we get to Bloomster and what you're doing now, I'm curious about the impact, right, that your experience has had at Citi. What was it there that kind of brought you to this conclusion that academic success isn't enough?
That's a great question, Vic. And a lot of it happened in those 17 years that took me to where I am right now. And I'll walk you through that journey, actually. So I'll add a little bit about the tech world as well. So I started in technology right after earning my degree in computer science. And I spent 6 years in tech, which was starting from a program analyst, the junior's job, getting to project manager, and then pivoted to finance, where I spent, as I said, over 17 years, close to 18 at Citigroup. I began as an analyst and then left Citi while I was serving as a director in its capital markets division. So both tech and finance basically taught me how to navigate complexity, make high stakes decisions, and lead teams in fast-paced and global environments. But I constantly felt a void. There was a persistent void that I felt, that there's something more to life, something more meaningful, something beyond that corporate hustle. So then I embarked on a personal journey of discovery. And what I found led me to create Bloomster, a platform designed to equip children with essential skills they need to thrive now and into the future. Because after thinking a lot, and that's most of my second half, and we can dig deeper into details about that, and I'll touch on the education part that you asked me. What I've felt was to be successful, it's not just about career milestones or even material achievements. It's about how we navigate through life. It's about how fulfilling that journey is. And it certainly holds true for me. And after spending a lot of time, I basically then decided to quit And that was back in 2022 and the first half, and I decided to build Bloomster. So now what happened? What drove me? What inspired me to create Bloomster? So let me give you a peek into that and how it relates to education world, because that's what you focus. Actually, there are two things, and I'll mention both. I usually start with the technology because that is this one more big thing that I discovered and what concerned me a lot. But then the second was the education. But most people relate to this technology, so I start with that. But for this one, I'll start with education one. So I'm a very keen observer. I'm more of an introvert kind of a person. So if I'm at a social event, it's not like you'll find me like talking to a ton of people. I'd be very selective, figure out who I want to talk to, and also so that kind of personality. But I'd be observing a lot. So in my finance career, obviously I was learning, but I said I had this feeling that I want to do something else, something more. So generally, you would agree, Eric, that sometimes it's too difficult to sort of go head on with your problems or whatever issues you have. Generally, it's easier to look away. So what I did was I focused initially on my own learning. And I did my MBA from NYU. I did my CFA, Chartered Financial Analyst, and a bunch of other courses. And also, I was focusing more on learning, like getting as much knowledge as possible. And in that phase, that gave me also time. And I was observing my colleagues, my fellow classmates, and also their kids, what was happening in their education and how that was contributing towards their growth and development. And what I found was that there was a gap between the academic world and the professional world. So, and I was noticing that everybody is smart in whatever their craft basically. So, in a way, the academics, whatever they studied, if it's law, they were great at it. If it was tax, they were great at it. Accounting, they were great at it. Finance and city, everyone was super, super smart. But what was missing was this social and emotional aspect of a human being. Like, how do you handle? Because we're talking about, yes, at analyst and junior level and all, you are basically just working. You had to create those documents, spreadsheets and all. But as you rise in your career, other things become more important. You're not actually all the time doing I'd call it grunt work. It's not grunt, but whatever's needed for those transactions. But as you rise up, so when I was in getting to VP level, and I count myself in that bucket, that I didn't know how to handle my own emotions, meetings and all. Sometimes I'd go back, from a meeting, and I would think, okay, why did I behave that way? So that thing was going on, and I was very keenly observing what's missing, and I could see that because there was no focus, at least when I was growing up, on learning these skills like self awareness, self confidence, self discipline, mindfulness, building resiliency, effective communication. There are so many, as you pointed out in the introduction, 25 such skills. So I basically thought, okay, this is what is needed in the professional world. And then I was as I said, focusing on what's happening in the education world. And I saw clearly nobody was focusing on that. Schools are doing a great job in academics, but they often overlook these essential skills, which truly matters for a child's future. And at the core, I mean, we'll get into what Bloomster does, but at the core, that's what I wanted to focus on. As I said, the schools, traditional education focuses on academics, but there has to be some focus on these skills because these are the first skills that truly matter and are determinant of success, not just in school, but in life. And there wasn't any structured or engaging way for children to learn these skills or cultivate these skills early on. I'd underline this early on because that's what was concerning me. Because every time I would think about something and I would get to a point, why didn't I focus on these? Generally, Eric, I don't know how it happened. And I was reading books on self-improvement. I would go to Barnes and Nobles, go to their self-improvement and read stuff, articles, blogs, videos and all. And obviously, as I told you, I was doing my MBA, so a lot of stuff happened over there too. But that's too late, I felt. You're already dealing with a lot of stuff in your career, professional life. And then on top of that, you have to learn these skills. It's not just about learning at that time, but it's also what you have already learned. That's how our minds work. So I had to unlearn a lot of stuff and then learn new stuff. So that's why I deal with all of it. That's why I thought, you know what, we need to teach our children these life skills early on in their life so that they can be better off. Because it's not they'll learn right away. It's not an overnight thing. They have to be gradually learning this thing over several years. And I chose this early adolescent years to focus on for Bloomster, and we'll talk about it separately. But that's when I think we should start. And then over years, by the time they are ready to go to college and ready for the professional world, the odds of them being successful are way higher if they've worked on these skills.
Yeah.
So that was one big thing I discovered. Okay, you know what? We got to do something about it. It's all about these skills.
Yeah.
The second big thing that I identified was about technology. Technology, I mean, yes, we've made several advances. And if you look at it, prior to 2000, turn of the century, I mean, yeah, things were developing, computers came on and all, but it was a slow pace. But after that, you can think of it as like, everything is on steroids. I think right around the turn of the century, Google came around 1998. Yes, internet came, that changed everything, but still it was slow for a few years. As soon as Google came, it gave you that entire internet in that one search box. That accelerated a lot of things. Then 2003, 2004, social media came. Then 2007, smartphone came. The combination of smartphones and social media took everything to a whole different level. The data that we were producing in 2000, in a year, we're producing that in a day. I mean, those are stats available. You can Google that. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, you would say, yes, I mean, why am I concerned? But it is true that a lot of data somehow like ends up in our feed, the more data on news and all. It's a human nature to know more. So we kind of like, get into that loop of, okay, going through a lot of stuff without knowing how it's affecting us. So it was concerning to me how much time I was spending on social media. Because initially when it came, we were all like, so fascinated by the technology. It was so much fun to like, add friends, connecting with them, sharing pictures and all. Little did we know that those networks, which we called social networks, were making us antisocial, unfriendly, and depressed in many cases. It took us like decade to figure that out. Now, like, no, I think around 2015 or so, there was ample research to show us that they are like, taking us in a very different direction than we initially thought. Me personally, I stopped using Facebook, anything. I never installed Instagram. Still don't have TikTok on my phone. And then that was one thing, but then AI. This is like, taking us to a whole different planet. It's like a paradigm shift. There's no comparison between social media and AI. I'm really concerned. My point is like, the future is incredible with AI, but it's just that we need to know how to handle it for our own benefit. I think it's off the rails right now. We're being served, I think, newer and newer versions every few months. I think ChatGPT has come up with, I think, maybe 5 versions, and every version is capable of doing way, way more, like, performing really great things. And we used to hang our hat on, okay, you know what, AI is, machines can never get to a point where they're as creative as humans, but it's amazing what they can do right now. So the future, the way you look at it, and I have a 4-year-old, when I see what's going to happen for her when, like, 15 years from now, when she's ready for college, or professional world when she's in 20 years from now, that world is going to look so much different. The way AI is advancing, we can pretty much see, like, what that world would look like. That world would be dominated by intelligent machines, algorithms, and there'll be constant change in that environment and extraordinary unpredictability. We cannot even today predict like what kind of jobs and markets are going to exist in 6 months to a year from now. And forget about 5, 10 years from now. I mean, we haven't even thought of those jobs, like what are going to exist in those years, 10, 15 years from now. So with that kind of a future, we need to prepare our children with not just academics. And I'm not discounting academics are essential, but we need to complement that, supplement that with something more. And that's what these skills are going to help our children to deal with that kind of environment. Why? Because that child, that individual would need to continuously learn new things. There was a recent report issued by World Economic Forum. I don't know if you got a chance to read through that, but that is clearly telling the recommendation is every human should learn new skill. Keep upgrading yourself
You're talking about
because
the
AI
future
is going to
jobs report?
say that
The
again,
future
sorry?
jobs report?
Yeah, future
Yeah,
jobs report.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Yes. I
yeah,
mean, you can see
yeah.
like,
I
hundreds
did a
of
whole
millions of
episode.
jobs.
I did an episode just
Okay.
on that. Yes.
Oh, okay. So you're familiar with that. So that
Yeah.
is like clearly, and I think people know about it, that what's happening, but it's just that we're not paying attention to it. We're still doing a huge disservice to our children by just focusing on academics because were so obsessed with those grades. I don't know what's
Yeah.
about those grades. I still see my friends and all, you need to get A's. Yes, A's are fine, but that future, I mean, algorithms will do most of that, like, academic related stuff for us at that time. So the child would need to be self-aware, like have a handle on his or her own emotions, need to handle setbacks, need to adapt to change, learn from their failure, take risks, and do all of this all over again, over and over again, because AI again will change something in 6 months and then they'll have to start again. So they'll
Sorry,
be beaten down.
if I can
Yeah,
jump in. You've
yeah,
been on a
please.
tear and
Yes,
it's been
please.
great,
Yes.
but I do have some
No, no. I
questions.
get excited. Sorry about that.
It's
Yeah.
okay. So I want to dig in a little bit more into the how.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So you had this
Hmm.
need, right? You saw that something
Yes.
needed to happen. So now how
Yes.
do you go do this,
Hmm.
right? Because this isn't your
Hmm.
expertise. You're not an
Yes.
educator by profession or
Absolutely.
experience.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so talk to me about the approach you took to going and solving the problem. And one of the
Absolutely.
things I want you to tell me about, because I'm very curious on this, is I
Uh-huh.
think I heard you say somewhere that you started out actually with comic books and then
Yes.
moved
Hmm.
to this animated
Yes.
format. So talk
Yes.
to me a little bit about this process. How did you go about trying to solve it?
Absolutely. Again, you're absolutely right. I'm not an education guy. I'm a tech and a finance guy. So I had to do a lot of research and talk to experts and all that. And the first thing was to basically what is needed for that kind of environment with that change and all what I mentioned. So I started listing these skills for me: self-awareness, self-confidence, self-discipline, self-regulation, self-management, emotional regulation, critical thinking, problem solving, and resilience. And I went on and on. It became a long list. And I could see, because working in finance and doing my MBA, I could see, like, anywhere where you put a structure around something, because in the corporate world, we had those 360-degree reviews. I don't know
Yeah.
if you did that or not. We used to do it. Every director, like, when I was director, we used to have a scorecard. It's used to call director scorecard. So when you put a structure around something, a framework, and you categorize things, it's easier for us, like humans, to remember it, follow it,
Yeah.
and stick to it.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I need to define a structure around this,
In
because I can't
education,
just
we
say, like,
call it
just
scaffolding, right?
scaffolding. Okay, there
Scaffolding,
you go.
right? Yes.
So I had to, like, do that scaffolding. So I thought, okay, what is it that needed? Let's define those areas. So if you look at it, there are certain standards, like CASTLE being one. I think collective or cooperative of for academic social emotional learning, collaborative for social emotional learning. And that has 5 tenets: self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision making, relationship management, and social awareness. So I thought, okay, yes, social and emotional learning absolutely needed, critical for a well-rounded individual, but there's more to it. So I basically came up with these 5 dimensions is what we have on Bloomster. So that's the social, emotional, intellectual, mindfulness, and physical. I thought if we do it, this is the holistic model that I have on Bloomster. And then I took these 25 plus skills and I categorized them, organized them in these 5 dimensions. And that became my holistic model. But then to get to your point, how do you actually teach these skills? So again, doing some research, talking to experts and all, I knew one thing, that if I'm focusing on this 10 to 14-year-olds, early adolescent years, I need to do something more, because to hold their attention, if they're reading some, let's say, a book or something, within 2 minutes, they'll check out
Yeah.
something online, let's say. So that was not the answer. And so that's on the one hand. On the other hand, I could see, like, these kids, if you put them on a video game, they can sit there and play for hours, like, 4 or 5, and you'll have to pull them out of it. So I knew that it has to be engaging, and then there has to be some interactiveness to it. So what I thought was, like, after, like, discussing with a bunch of people, that stories can be that, and it has to be practical, relatable, and it has to be fun. So these 3 things are critical. So after again discussing, I think story was a basic model that we thought. And the first idea that came was, how about comics? Like, those colorful graphics and all, where there are characters, they are also going through something. We can mimic real world situations in that comic format, so that kids would see, okay, what's happening? Anything that you see, so self-confidence, let's say, so we can paint in that comic that a kid has to present in a class, or there's something that requires them to have that confidence, and we can show them how they are struggling with it, the thoughts that they have, and then give them those practical tools to deal with those situations. So that's how we thought about it initially.
Sorry, I
Dabbled
want to
with, I
jump in and just
actually, yeah,
make a comment
yes,
about
please, go
the
ahead.
comic book theory,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah,
it really resonates
please.
with me, because I had a guest on the show who
Uh-huh,
Colleen Kelly, who
uh-huh,
um, she was teaching university chemistry for like
uh-huh,
25 years, but she ended
uh-huh,
up creating comic
mm-hmm,
books that teach
uh-huh.
college level chemistry to fourth graders. And
Oh,
it
okay.
worked so well. Somebody did a
Uh-huh.
documentary on it, and the documentary won an Emmy. So, I
Nice.
mean, but just phenomenal. But she developed this whole set
Mm-hmm.
of comic books. And so, we
Uh-huh.
don't think of this as being a medium for teaching kids,
No.
but she proved that
Yes.
yes, you could use a comic book and teach college level chemistry to fourth graders, and they got it. She
Right.
calls it
Yeah.
molecular literacy. And so
Okay. Oh,
characters and the
nice name.
stories
I like
teach
it.
you, yeah, about
Mhm.
molecules and yes, chemical
Oh,
reactions
absolutely.
and all the
Yeah.
combinations and stuff. Yeah, so really fun stuff and powerful potentially because the
I
kids
do.
loved it.
Yeah.
Right? These were great kind of fun
Uh-huh.
stories with fun characters
Yes.
in them. And
Yes.
so yes, they learned without feeling like they were learning something, which is
Absolutely. That's the key thing
yeah,
here. That's the key
yeah,
thing, just to hold their attention.
yep,
And I said, like, practical and the relatable part. Relatable is you can paint these characters in a very relatable way. So I make sure that when the learner or the student, when they're looking at this, so let me first complete that part,
yeah, yeah.
and I'll come to this
Sorry,
relatable.
I interrupted you.
So no, 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 please, please. Happy to hear your thoughts and this feedback. I'm glad at least that model was proven and learning that it won an Emmy award. Like, it kind of validates at least my thought
Absolutely.
process. But I did some initial studies. So we launched beta version. Initially, when I launched, I didn't want to open it to everyone. So we launched a beta and opened it to a very select group of people just to collect some feedback, like see if this thing works. And in that, I'd say good 60-70% people said that their children are having difficulty reading as much. But then there were 30% who were saying, okay, their kids really enjoyed comics and like reading and all that kind of stuff. So that gave me a pause that yes, there were those thought bubbles and all, there's some reading and all. So I decided, okay, like how can we improve this thing? And that's been my quest actually. I get feedback and I want to work on it. I want to keep improving. I'm not claiming that I have nailed it and I have like figured everything out. And we have enhanced our platform so much from where I started. So the first change was to take it to animation level. Same stuff, story based, characters, relatable, everything was the same. It's just that those characters were moving and we were able to do much more because you're limited to let's imagine like an image on a
Yeah.
screen, how much you can write in those thought bubbles and speech bubbles. So either font would get too small, so it's like straining. So I think graduating to animation where dialogues and all those characters can have a good, meaningful conversation. So we thought, okay, that will work, and that's what has been working. We've been building. Now we have over 1,000 lessons. We have 32 courses, but those 32 courses have 1,000 lessons.
Hmm.
So we built a lot of content in the last 2.5 years, right after we graduated to animation format. To complete the relatable part, I make sure that all our characters are this age group so that a learner, let's say, are able to see, okay, Sam in this course, this character is like Alex in my class,
Hmm.
and this Amy is like Sarah in my class. So they're able to make those connections and they're learning all those tools that we're providing them on a particular skill, if or whatever that course is focusing on. So they're able to relate that when that situation is happening or similar situation is happening in that real world, and they're able to use whatever they learned in the course. So that was the idea, and the animation worked really well. So
Sorry,
that's
I got
how I
one
got
more
to. Yeah,
question.
please. Yeah.
Sorry, and
Hmm.
I'm full of questions. This is what I do, right?
Please, yeah, right
So,
on.
um,
Shoot.
on the animation side, so by the way, I
Uh-huh.
come from the video game industry, right? I created
All
video
right.
games. I worked
Okay.
for EA for six
Uh-huh.
years. So, how interactive is this now? Is this like a video game? The kids are kind of playing it, or is it
Mhm.
presented as video?
So that's a challenge. So we used a software to generate these animations. And because of that limitation, so there's not much happening in that video itself, but the interactiveness is outside of it. So the video is playing. So I call this the left panel. So that's how the screen is divided in on the platform. That's where the video is playing. And on the right side, we provide whatever additional real world application is what we call it, like some additional tips and tricks or some thought-provoking questions on whatever the learner learned in that video. And then we have knowledge checks. We broke down our course into 4 modules. Each module have 2 knowledge checks and a module exercise at the end. These knowledge checks are again very practical. So we don't ask like any question, which is like a definitional question. It's all about applying. So we will give the learner a scenario, like a small paragraph. Okay, this is what's happening based on what we know the learner just went through, let's say in a couple of lessons. And that scenario is where, okay, now you're in a class and this thing is happening. What are you going to do? And then we provide them certain options. So
Right.
that's where the interactiveness is. I'll add that again, we want it to be as close as possible to how parents teach their kids. So this knowledge check, the way it works is, so we have that scenario. So you're required to practically apply what you learned. And then these options, there's no right and wrong answer. So generally, like, correct me if I'm wrong, this is how it works. Like, so a parent is out on, let's say, a soccer field. Something happened where a parent would feel, okay, this is a teaching opportunity. I should tell my child this was the right thing to do or not the right thing to do. And you would tell your child, this is why it was right or this is why it was wrong. So you would explain your child, and that's how they learn. So what we did was on the platform, so we have these 3 options. Every question has 3 options, and these are ranked in the background, meaning there's a best answer where we know this is how the parent would advise their child. And there's obviously something that parents would say, you know what, this is not how you should handle the situation. And there's a one middle answer. It's not absolutely wrong, but there's a better way to answer that.
Right.
So when a learner would click on any one of these options, they would get to see, we call them nuggets, and a pop-up would open up and explain them, okay, what does it mean if they are thinking this is the right answer or this is not the right answer. So they get to learn all of that, what's behind all those questions. So that's the interactiveness part of it. I'd be like super excited if I could solve this part, like, make that video itself like a video game. But obviously, like, Bloomster is a young brand. There's a
Really
long journey
hard.
ahead. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, someday I'll get there, Eric. Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
how about the other thing that just popped in my head now, of course, is,
Hmm.
using chatbots. Have you looked at,
Hmm.
your kind of assessment piece maybe becoming a dynamic dialogue with a chatbot that's basically
Hmm.
it's trained to deal in this particular area.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it kind of
Hmm.
asks the kids questions and has a
Hmm.
dialogue with them about it. Have you looked at using AI in that way?
To be honest, yeah, I know a lot of, like, platforms are going in that direction. I am a bit skeptical. So all our courses are developed by PhDs, teachers with years of experience. I want that human angle, at least for now. I personally feel that there are no proper guardrails around because I use ChatGPT for certain things and I see that it makes mistakes. And we're dealing with children. So I'm a kind of like, just erring on the side of caution right now. In
Yeah.
the future, yes,
Yep.
we'll get there at some point, but I want to take like baby steps, like
Yeah.
slowly get there. Right now, I'm relying on experts, and that's what I'm claiming that all our courses are vetted, age appropriate. The content is absolutely appropriate for this age group, and there's no content because I wanted to stay away from psychological evaluation also because this age group, they're so vulnerable. If let's say they get a wrong idea in their head, if let's say, because a lot of people cross that line where they go into like the psychological evaluation, that they would say something where they're not expert, they're not psychologists, they know a thing or two, but there's a fine line where you should not cross. So that's why, like, I'm just like, on a caution side, I'm not using bots at the moment. But yes, like in the future, like, once things are sorted out and we can rely on them, it's proven, and then yes, obviously we'll graduate to that
Yeah.
level. That's
So
my
just a
take.
question there. So
Yes.
so first of all, I wasn't suggesting that you go use ChatGPT
Hmm.
in the wild.
Right.
Right? Yeah, you
No.
definitely want
Yeah.
to do a walled garden.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
only can
Yeah.
use the content you've given it, right? It can only
Yes. Yeah.
respond
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that
I'm
context.
sure.
But
Yes.
have you looked at what Khan Academy is doing there?
I've heard, but I've not gone deep into it. But I've
Okay.
heard they're doing a phenomenal
Yeah.
job, at least in the
So
academic
yeah,
side. Yes.
I also did an episode on that, but
Yeah. Hmm.
part of what I really liked about their model, and you might be thinking about this too, is that all of their interactions there are Socratic
Hmm.
questioning. So in other words, if the
Hmm.
student asks a question, you don't
Yeah.
really get an answer back. You get another question,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
So it doesn't just answer you and tell you what the information
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
It comes back and
Uh-huh.
says, "Well, what are you thinking? What do you think it might be? Why do you
Uh-huh.
think it would be that?" Right? Or
Yeah.
what have you tried?
Hmm.
So I think that's kind of really good use of the AI instead of just
Right.
trying to give
Hmm.
you an answer which may or may not be
Right.
completely accurate,
Yeah.
depending on how
Yeah.
well it really understood,
Yeah.
the context.
Right.
It doesn't try to
Exactly.
answer it.
Yeah.
It actually
Uh-huh.
engages you in a dialogue about why do you think about it this way, right?
Hmm.
What does
Yeah.
it mean to you? So anyway, just a thought. You might look at some of what
Right.
they're doing just
Can
as
I
a
comment on
benchmark.
that?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
So my sort of initial take on that is that I want to rely on these experts like psychologists who've been in the industry and know about whatever field they're in. So example like Beth, who's done our self-confidence course.
mhm,
Confident do you believe in yourself? 25 plus years of experience, psychologists, done therapy and all, and developed a lot of stuff, courses and all in the past for various institutions. I wanted to leverage her experience because she is an expert. She knows exactly what these kids go through at this
yeah,
age. And so I wanted to provide that answer in a way instead of question, because I feel like there's a huge misconception that these kids will learn on their own. Yes, they will learn, but do you want them to just go out in the wild and learn, because they'll learn good things and bad things at the same time? I
yeah,
wanted to provide an infrastructure, a safe environment where they're learning only curated stuff. That's what our courses are, and
yes,
prepared by
yes,
experts and all. So that's my thing there.
yeah. Yeah, no. All right, I want to take a quick break from my conversation with Nitin and plug the Human Intelligence Movement. This is not a paid advertisement. I just love what those guys are doing and want to support them in their efforts. So the Human Intelligence Movement is an organization whose mission is to ensure that all students have the skills to thrive and succeed in an AI-powered world. So there'll be a link in the show notes. Please, join them, support that effort. All right, now back to our conversation with Nitin as we talk more about the impact of AI and what's going to happen in the future here with education. No, no,
Yeah.
that's great, and so
Mhm.
it also
Yeah.
brings me back around again to kind of the pedagogy here, right?
Uh-huh.
So the when we say scaffolding or whatever, right? So there's
Yeah.
always, and even in storytelling, right, there's this kind of
Hmm.
process you bring them along.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so how do you, with your experts, right, and I know how
Hmm.
difficult this is to kind of build a story and characters and dialogue that
Hmm.
really teaches what you want to teach. So do you have an
Yeah.
example maybe you can share of a story and why that
Yeah.
particular story is so effective?
Yeah. I mean, I'll touch on a couple of them. One of them is so we first, when we were thinking, we defined what are the learning objectives of a course. So we have divided our course into 4 modules. Each module will have 8 lessons. The eighth lesson is always a module exercise, but it has its lesson as well. So we're talking about 8 lessons. We define all those module objectives. And then we obviously think about what the story is going to be. So this one example is in this course, there was a some play that was going to happen, and there was a group of kids who were part of this with the director, the play, the teacher, who was Miss Rivera, if I remember the name correctly from that course. And these kids were dealing with their own things, one had some debate competition, some exam, and one guy was had a big soccer game coming up, or maybe a football game. So they were obviously part of this overarching this story of that play, where there was a finale basically, when the play actually was happened, and everybody was struggling with presenting, like handling them on the stage and whatnot. So helping them through building that confidence, teaching them those mindfulness skills, like how do their thoughts when they're out on the stage and they're not able to say what they want to say, what's going through their head. So in that story, we were able to teach them these things. I think the course was focusing more on mindfulness. Likewise, there was a self-confidence course Beth did, where she used, there were like 4 or 5 kids that were struggling with confidence, and they each had their own struggles, so and we make sure that our, the student population is diverse. So somebody from a very different background have, communication issues or not able to express themselves. So whatever their issues are, we kind of blend in this whole story. So this teacher gave them a project, and in that project, they had to actually apply something, and they were struggling applying those skills. And then they would come back as a group and learn together. So that becomes a overarching story. And one thing, Eric, I learned, I had no idea that's how it works in this age group. They tend to, and this was PhD giving me this advice, that this age group learns from peers. So most of our teaching in our courses happens with kids discussing among themselves. So I did this, I did that, I'm struggling with this, how do I work on this? Rather than a teacher or a counselor telling them something, coming from the
Yep.
top. And that was a learning from me. So that's how, most of our courses where most of the teaching is happening.
Okay. So one other question.
Mm-hmm.
So in the delivery
Yeah.
of this now,
Mm-hmm.
is it all
Mm-hmm.
kind of online, or is there a
Yeah.
like a human adult teacher interacting with kids either
Yeah.
pre or post to kind of discuss
Yeah.
what they're
Mm-hmm.
learning?
No, it's all online. It's video. And I should have added, is that we have, because it's all about, every course is designed to encourage learners to apply those skills, to make that, to drive that behavioral change, the
Hmm.
practical change as soon as possible. So we have ton of exercises. So as I said, like every module has a module exercise. The idea behind that is that every learner should reflect on what they learned in that module, and we provide a lot of workbooks and all. So if a course is about impulse control, they'll be encouraged to apply the stop, think, and act technique, and there'll be some workbook. They'll be encouraged to discuss it with their family, actually apply that technique if that's working or not. If it's about leadership, they'll be encouraged to take some leadership role in their community or in some school project or something. So everything is about encouraging them to actually apply those skills. And there are a ton of these like goal setting courses, so many of these workbooks, how to plan, how to set goals, near-term goals, long-term goals, how to approach that, how to schedule, stuff like that. So they do all of this exercise. Self-awareness course is a good example, where they have to do this inventory about their own strengths and weaknesses, their values and beliefs.
Hmm.
So they do it with their friends, family members. We encourage them to engage their parents a lot, because they need to learn. Parents need to know what their kids are learning on
Yeah.
the platform. That's how we do our courses.
Cool. Which feeds perfectly into my next bit, which I pretty much ask everybody. All right, I kind of grill
Mhm.
everybody on this. Measuring,
All right.
right? So how do we
Mhm.
know that it works?
Right. So the real test, without polishing or sugarcoating it, is basically when parents are able to see, is my child, let's say course is about responsible decision making. So
Okay.
now, when you're out there, there's some situation going on, and how's my child making that decision? That's how it works, right? If I see my child is really decided something very consciously and made the right choice, that's how parents would know. We try to mimic exactly that on the platform. So as I said, scenario-based questions is one good way to test a child. Just put them in a situation and ask a question based on that situation, and let them answer that. We have an amazing thing on the platform, on our website. Actually, we call them ebooks, free to download. Use the same responsible decision making as an example. So what we do is, on that ebook, we've provided 5 scenarios. First of all, we explain what the skill is about, responsible decision making. And then we encourage parents to have a meaningful and engaged interactive discussion with their child, not like in a question answer format,
Yeah.
but it provides some frameworks, and that's how we should approach it. And then it has 5 scenarios, obviously prepared by an expert. where they are just having a dialogue. Okay, you are in the situation. Let's say you are at a gas station after school, which is close to your school, and you go there and you are in that store. Your friend picks up some stuff and puts it in his bag. Like, what are you going to do in that situation? So because they go through this peer pressure, but they know that this is not the right thing, how are they going to handle the situation? So we then tell them, okay, just like be open. Let the child give you something free flow. It shouldn't feel as though they're put at a spot. They need to answer. They need to give you the perfect answer. And then that's how parents would get to know, okay, yes, my child is really making the right decision. I would do the same thing. So that's how I'm approaching it. We're also building some new features on the platform where we are telling parents, okay, these are the 5 objectives in this module that your child is learning. And as and when they are taking those lessons, we kind of like show them the progress on all those 5 learning objectives. Then I'm giving them a module challenge. This is what we're calling it. It's not actually launched, so we're actually working on it. And in the module challenge, we're going to create a situation, real life situation, very relatable to this age group. And same thing, let them answer those questions. That's how the parents will get to know. We'll present them some sort of report as well. Last thing I would mention is like we have these growth surveys also on the platform. So that's before they start the course, they take this growth surveys. A growth survey has like multiple components. And first, I think 12 or so questions are more of I do this. If it's a confidence, I feel good about myself. I feel good about my abilities. Because what we found, there's a gap between what a parents thinks about the child, if it's like decision making or confidence related stuff, versus how a child thinks about their own abilities, of how they think about themselves. So just for parents, knowing how the child answered those questions is a great insight, and matching it with what they think. So these are some examples that we have on the platform to basically help parents understand what's going on
Yeah.
with their
So
child.
I just want to share a story I think you'll really appreciate because I remember also seeing somewhere talking about, a child's, brain
Mhm,
isn't fully developed yet and the part of the
mhm,
brain that
mhm.
helps with decision making, right? And so I
Right.
remember with my own son at one point sitting
Mhm,
him down and having him watch a
mhm,
documentary that was about this.
mhm.
So
Uh-huh.
he was, maybe 13 or 14 years old, and we had him watch this
Mhm.
thing so we could explain to him that it's not your fault that your brain isn't
Yeah.
developed yet and you can't make good decisions right all the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, but we used it, afterwards. So he'd want to go out with his friends and, where are you going to go? He's like, oh, don't worry about it. And I'm like, oh, no, no, no. Remember,
Mhm.
you're brain damaged, right? You don't know
Yeah.
how to make good decisions
Yeah.
yet. You're going to get in
Yeah.
trouble,
Yes. Yes.
right? Without
Yeah.
some structure here. And he'd go,
Mhm.
oh,
Yeah.
Dad, right? But he got it. It was like
Mhm.
it was kind of
Mhm.
helping him understand that yes,
Mhm.
if I go out with my friends, we're all brain damaged, and the more brain damaged kids
Yeah.
you put together, the more likely we are to get in trouble, right? So and our advice to him was
Absolutely.
just slow down, right? You get in that
Uh-huh.
situation, just slow down. You need
Yeah.
more time to
Right.
process because you've got brain damage.
Right.
Eventually
Yeah.
you'll be
Yeah.
old enough and your brain will function and you'll be able to make those decisions. But for
Mhm.
now, you know,
Right.
just
Yeah.
be careful. But anyway,
Right.
some
Right.
some of your stuff
No.
I know relates
No. No.
to
No.
that
This is so
understanding.
relevant to. Yeah. I mean, Eric, you've hit the nail. I mean, this is so relevant to the point that why I chose this age group. Obviously, when I started, I was so excited. I wanted to do all K through 12.
Yeah.
You're talking about elementary, middle, and high school, but that's a daunting task to deal with such diverse crowd age group. So I had to really pick element. Should I go for elementary? Should I start there, or middle school, or high school? I chose middle school. One of the reasons is this, that's this is the time 11-year-old, 10 to 11 year, 12-year-old, they are transitioning from the parent-centered world or the childhood to going into the adulthood. This is a transition phase. And biologically, they're going through physical changes, as you pointed out.
Yeah.
That prefrontal cortex is just beginning to develop. It starts when they're 11-year-old, 10 to 11-year-old, and a fully mature human brain is when you are 25-year-old. So
Yeah.
this first 10 to 19 is the most critical phase where all of that prefrontal cortex is developing. Their executive functions, impulse control, decision making doesn't exist before that. Expecting a 9-year-old to make decisions is pointless. So exactly to your point. So then
Yeah.
I thought, okay, you know what? This is the right time to plant these seeds of awareness of these skills. They don't know how to make decisions, so they need some framework. And
Yep.
that's where, self-awareness comes in. Self-awareness allows you to think through what are your values and beliefs, what are your strengths and weaknesses. If they've done that inventory, because they don't have any yardsticks, they're just thrown into situations. They have to make decisions every day, 30, 50 decisions every day. And we expect them to make good decisions. They don't have any criteria.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's at this point we need to give them something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
Cool.
absolutely.
All right. So as always on the show, we kind of
Hmm.
at the end we talk about the future state. So
Uh-huh.
where are we going from here with Bloomster and SEL? What do you think
Hmm.
needs to happen? How does this really have a scalable impact over the next 3 to 5
Yeah.
years?
Right. And I think of this all the time, Eric. So the way I see is success for me is not revenue. I don't consider that. For me is when the parents, all parents, are instinctively thinking about social and emotional learning or holistic learning as such, not just as an add-on, but as a fundamental and integral part of their child's education. That's when we've really made an impact. I mean, this won't happen overnight, long journey. But I want to see a shift where when parents are evaluating schools, they're not just looking at curriculum, academics, but they're also looking at what is the school doing for social and emotional learning, or more than that, these skills that we talk about on our platform. That's when things will start to change. I think there has been some focus, COVID also accelerated that. But as soon as we came out of COVID, I think things are falling back into that whole academic thing, because I spoke with so many teachers and they were all talking about, okay, you know what, school started something, they hired somebody. And even somebody I spoke to, she was hired for that particular reason. And she created some content and she was let go right after 2022 or so, because parents are again going back to my child needs this, academics, 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 those grades.
Yeah.
I think we need to do more on showing them the benefits of what's needed in that future. Shift is happening, but I do see the way the education world is structured. It's so rigid with those standardized tests and all, and it didn't happen overnight. Obviously, it's century, like half a century. Most of it actually. I'm not an education guy. What I've read and seen, it happened after post Second World War and how things developed, how universities became bigger and bigger. It will take some time. Obviously, it's becoming faster and faster in the last 15 years. I've seen the shift where people are talking about social emotional learning. States are giving grants on social emotional learning. It will take some time, and that's my mission to keep pushing in that direction.
Yeah.
I personally am steering Bloomster. Obviously, I wanted to start go to parents directly, but I'm also working now on having Bloomster implemented in schools, because day one schools can start with our courses, which are built by experts. So they don't need to develop any content. And our courses would work really well in schools. So that's my focus. I want to see, in 5 years that, most of the schools in the United States at least have Bloomster implemented. So that's my goal and
Yeah.
the direction that I'm working on.
Well, the thought I have there is so one of the reasons why I don't think you see this in schools is
Hmm.
because it's so hard
Hmm.
to measure, right? How do I give you a
Yes. Uh-huh.
grade and say, oh, your
Hmm.
decision making is
Hmm.
great or your critical thinking skills, right?
Hmm.
These are really hard things to quantify. And
Hmm. Hmm.
school budgets and funding and all of that is
Yes.
based on
Hmm.
quantifiable skills, which is why the academic stuff is so much easier to measure.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
if you introduce SEL and
Hmm.
academic performance goes up, right,
Yes.
then it's
Yeah.
still a win, right? And so if you can
Yeah.
make that
Hmm.
correlation and say, oh, when our kids are
Hmm.
more emotionally,
Yes. Hmm.
socially,
Hmm.
mature, right? They have these
Hmm.
skills, they actually do better
Hmm.
academically as well. Then
Yes.
it the schools kind of go, oh, okay, you have evidence of this now, you know,
Yes.
I'll buy into the program because we want that
Hmm.
academic performance. And if doing SEL helps,
Right.
then yeah.
No,
Anyway, I
you're
know you're doing
absolutely
some of
right.
that. You are working on
Yeah.
that
No,
as
I'm
well.
confident that we'll solve that as well. And I have no doubt, Eric, that this social emotional learning helps with academic performance. And there is like, very few examples that you can take. Like, I keep going back to the self-awareness because that's like, one of the number one skill I feel like, everyone should focus on because it helps you understand yourself.
Mm.
And just knowing your strengths and weaknesses. If you've done that work on yourself, like what are my strengths and weaknesses, you won't put something on yourself, oh, there's something wrong with myself. And that's what I want from our children,
Yep.
that they are aware of their abilities and they'll just think, okay, you know what? I'll go home and figure out it takes me more time, but I'll be as smart as this guy, like, who's sitting in front.
Yeah.
So just helping them so that their stress is lowered. They're not thinking about there's something wrong with them. They're also in the situation more vulnerable to ask for help if they're not blaming themselves that there's something wrong.
Right.
So all of these things certainly would help in their academics. So it's just to your point, maybe somehow quantifying it, showing in some sort of a report.
Yeah.
That's something that I'll be
Yep.
solving soon.
Great. Well, is there
Yeah.
anything else you were hoping we would talk about that we haven't covered?
I know we've covered everything. I think I'll just add that in my own learning journey, it's and where I am today, two things have been very important for me: meaningful work and meaningful relationship. And meaningful work, obviously, as I said, like I kept going until I found, okay, Bloomster is the thing I want to. Basically, this is my calling in a way, and this is a mission that I want to work on. And our kids struggle through a lot. That process is so inefficient these days. They're just like, going on their own in the wild. They stumble through stuff and somehow get to something. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. I think we owe it to them to help them through this. It's not just about finding your lane. There are two aspects, like finding your lane and then walking that lane.
Mm.
So right now that both these processes are happening at random, and that's what these skills will help you in both, trying to see, okay, what you're good at. Because I used to ask this question, you must have heard this all the time. Oh, everyone has a talent, you just need to find yours. And I was like, it was frustrating that, oh man, what is my talent? When you're a 25-year-old, like, you ask this question, you don't get any answer.
Yeah.
And that is already late. And that's my quest, like, help these kids to do this work about self-awareness, self-confidence, discipline. Let them build those skills over here, and then they'll be able to find what they want to do. And that's just one part of it. Walking that lane, like becoming good at it, is a whole different. Like that, there also these goal setting, confidence, self-awareness,
Yeah.
resilient. All these skills are going to be required in that. Michael Phelps didn't become Michael Phelps. He had to get up every day, 4 in the morning, get to that pool, do that work. Any
Yeah.
athlete, any new musician, you have to do all that work. So if you were to like, make this process efficient for them, we have to start early. And that's what I always felt like, in my 30s and all. Now I'm 46 almost. I wish I had started earlier.
Yeah.
I wish like, somebody had guided me early on. I love my parents, but again, it's a matter of like, they didn't know that these skills are going to be needed. So now it's upon us, like, people like you, me, just to sort of spread the word that this is what's needed now and would help children in the future
Yeah.
so
Well, and just a
that
point I'll
people
make there
start
too
thinking.
is we can't
Mhm.
necessarily assume that the parents have those skills to give them,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
The
Yeah.
parents may not have the skills. It, you know,
Yeah.
Sadly,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
kids growing up in households that don't model
Uh-huh.
the right behaviors
Yeah.
either, right? So,
Yeah.
so yeah, we have to overcome that hurdle as well at
Right.
times. So you,
Are saying so many things that so resonate with me. I don't know if we have enough time or not. I'd like to add something
sure,
here if
yeah,
you. So this is exactly what I thought. Like, when I was observing, when I was talking about the education thing, there are three things that I identified. One is what you said. Either parents will have to model how kids should like make decisions or any of these skills that you talk, they are the model because kids look up to them, right? So that's one way. Very tough. Only in few situations I've seen like, yes, this guy has it covered. And I know one person like that, but only one person. I've met so many. The modeling is very tough. The second is you supplement by private schools. And I was not a believer, Eric, but I saw a kid going through a private school And I saw the kid when he was 5, like started, and then I met him and like literally had a conversation when he was just graduating, was about to go to his prom. And I could see like this kid is very well put together. You can have like a meaningful conversation even at that age. Because I saw that there was a focus, individual focus. There was another friend whose kid was going to a private school. I could see like the teacher focusing. If there's something wrong, they would right away inform and they would make sure that that issue or whatever the child is struggling with is looked into. But that comes at a very high cost, like $30,000-$40,000 a year, right from like, elementary schools. Not many people can do that, right? So that's the second one.
Yeah.
The third is at random, like something would change while the child is growing up. And when I say random, it means that a child has some like notion and they are going through some experiences and all, and they would see some sports athlete, let's say, that they really like, and then that becomes okay, I want to be that guy. Or
Yeah.
some family member who's like really smart, and so they want to be like him. Or some businessman like top Elon Musk, Bezos, and all, Steve Jobs, something that they look up to, and I
Yeah.
want to be like him.
Right.
So that
Heroes.
happens. Yes, heroes. So if you draw a common thread across all three, it's about what the child is experiencing, the exposure that they get, even parents modeling them. So that's like they're going through some exposure, right? So we need to provide them that curated exposure as much as possible without our own biases in them. So that's what the model is. Like, we're trying to give these, like, these curated sort of situations and stories and all, so that kids can learn the right way rather than learning some, like, some negative stuff and all, randomly learning. Because that's one of the big misconception that I, like, briefly mentioned, that kids will learn something on their own. Another big misconception is they're too young to understand these concepts. That is not true. I mean, they are so smart. They
Yeah.
observe everything so quickly that you'd be surprised.
Yeah.
And the third one is like, you can't teach it in an online setup. I think we are proving that wrong on Bloomster.
Yeah.
I'll just like, stop there.
All right. Well, this
Yeah.
has been
Yeah.
great, and I truly appreciate your time talking with me about this stuff, and I'm
No,
excited to
thank
kind
you.
of follow along and see how you do.
No,
So, yeah, let's stay in
absolutely.
touch, and maybe I'll get an update from you in a year or so, and see what else you're doing.
No, definitely. Thanks for having me again, Eric. It was
Well,
a pleasure
thank
to
you
be
so
here.
much.
All right, great.
There are some things I really love about Nitin's story. So, first of all, he identified a problem. He understood that he didn't have the skills and experience himself to solve that problem, so he brought together experts to help him. And he listened to parents and students and teachers, and then he iterated. He continuously improved and both the content and the delivery mechanisms. So he also recognized and acknowledged, as we talked here, right, that things are changing rapidly, and he has to continue to evolve and advance in order to have a positive impact. And what this also demonstrates for me is that we don't have to have all the answers. We don't have to have a perfect solution in order to make a difference. Right? Nitin is a doer, and he didn't sit on the sidelines, complain, he got to work. These are the kind of stories that I love to share on the Education Innovators podcast. I'm Eric Byron. Thanks for listening. I hope you subscribe if you haven't already. We have so much great content coming, some amazing guests lined up. So stay tuned, subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.